So I had to change location, as you can tell, from the nice scenery behind me. Just now I'm in the woods. I have some people a little bit further off over there. My dog is panting in the background. Let's see if I can continue this story, sharing my testimony without much distraction. I do have notes, no big secret. I want to make sure I follow along and tell the story, share my testimony correctly. In sharing all of these things, I don't want to glorify any of the sin in my past life. It's actually really a past life, not as in reincarnation, but when I was living in the kingdom of darkness. Even though I was saved from the age of 8, I still spent many years living in darkness. And even after the Lord came to me on that wonderful day and I laid before him and I promised to serve him, there have still been many, many wasteful years. And I'm done wasting time. I'm 51 years old. I don't have time to waste. So if you know your calling, make sure and seek the Lord fully with all of your heart and find out what it is that he wants you to do, because you can go down many, many dead ends. So let me begin. I'm on chapter 3 of my testimony. This is where my war with God and the church began. My father and I began fighting every day. After my father was kicked out of the church, my mother and my dad, of course, would fight. My father fell into depression, and it was very difficult. It was very difficult on my siblings, and being that ripe age of 14, I all of a sudden had to become more mature than maybe my age would allow. I remember a dear friend of the family at the time was over during one of my father and mother's quite extensive and loud fighting. He called me outside and he said to me, "Son, you're gonna have to go in there and you're gonna have to be the man of the home. You're gonna have to discipline your mother and father, and it's gonna be very hard for you because they should be the one disciplining you, but in this situation, you have to go in there." That's how bad it got with my mother and father. And I remember going in to the room and yelling at them and telling them to be quiet, and they're not listening to each other. And I said, one at a time, I began to be a referee. And I told them, one at a time, speak about your grievances against each other. And they did. They respected me. It was definitely of God that I went into the room, but it wouldn't be enough. I would fight with my dad every single day after he was kicked out of the church. And eventually, I started lying about where I was going. When I would say I would go to see a friend, I would go to see some other friend, someone they didn't know. And that's when hashish was first introduced to me. That's when alcohol was introduced. I had this hole in my heart. I was heartbroken. And after being baptized in that church, can you imagine then your father being kicked out of that same church after he himself was instrumental in the baptism? Can you imagine the pain that I felt watching my father sit in the corner? I began to hate the church, and I began to hate God. I started to disbelieve in everything I was taught. It was a really tough period for me and my family. and I would hide the alcohol I was drinking with bubble gum. It seemed to work for a period of time. And yeah, I used to do terrible things, like even huff glue. It was I was an unbelievable mess. I remember this one night, my dad, maybe moved by the Spirit, maybe moved by his emotion, I don't know, but he woke me up in the middle of the night and called me outside, and I was in my pajamas and I was standing by the car, and he spoke to me and he said, "Son, if you don't get right with God, you might not wake up in the morning. You might find yourself awake in hell." He said, "I see you in a dark room and these people are doing these terrible things." In a way, my father was right. He could see where I was going. Either way, it was no good. I left home when I was 16 years old, and I got on a thing called student welfare. So as long as I was going to high school, the money would keep coming in and I had my own apartment. It actually looked pretty good. I was the cool kid at school. I had girls that liked me. Believe it or not, at 51, fat and gray, but I was quite handsome as a youngster, as a teenager, and highly talented individual. I went to a specialized art school for drama and for creative writing. I was interested in music, and I had this concept, that artists had, that I had to be famous one day. I had to make it, and this drive to be successful in the art world, can often be very, very unhealthy and cause people to compromise their faith, which in many ways I did compromise my faith.